What is up, YouTube? It is Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd, and we're back to another installment of Panels Without Borders, my live stream show where I usually have guests. We talk about news and other things that have been going on in comic books. And I do have a very special guest tonight that we're going to bring in here in just 1 minute. And if you're kind of been curious, who's this guy that you're doing these Devil's Advocates shows with? Where do you come from? What's his origin story? Who is he? Well, we are going to get to know who is Kyle tonight in our show as we interview him coming up later in the show. We're also going to cover some other topics that have been going on in the comic book related world. G.I. Joe Transformers news. We have, unfortunately, the passing of John Romita Sr. to talk about. Also some MCU, Disney, Avatar style delays, those kinds of things. So we will be getting to that stuff here in a moment. But first, I need to bring in a guest of honor for the show tonight, which is producer Kyle from the EXP. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
You said honor, and I'm weirded out by that.
Well, you have a beard, so you're welcome here. That's all I really ask for my guests.
I put some time into my beard today, too.
Damn straight. You got to come correct when you're coming on here.
Well, and I had medical appointments, and you never know when you're going to run into a hot nurse. And, be like, hey, do you like chicken wings?
What's your favorite cheesecake flavor?
Right, exactly. So you gotta come correct when you're at the hospital, because you never know, like, when a hot nurse is gonna have to give you a sponge bath, or be like, do you want to go to get cafeteria food? Like,
that's hilarious. That's the exact. So I had medical appointments today as well, and being a married dude who just had his 13th year anniversary. I did take a shower this morning, so I had that going for me. I feel like that's, if you're going in, you're getting examined, it's only the courteous thing to do. But my beard was all scruffy and my hair was all, I had a backwards hat on, in the appointment and everything. And so I had to kind of rinse off and get the beard all straightened out for you fine folk, because I actually wanted to get dressed up and all gussied up for you.
It's funny. No, it's one of those, like I said, the first time I ever was like, oh, I'm here. I'm a little not put together, and the nurse is smoking. I'm going to change my ways, man. Change my ways.
That is awesome. So for those of you who are tuning in, who are like, what is going on with this show? First of all, I had to do a live show. It's been too long. I'm making a bad habit of this. One thing we will get to later in the show is the channel member giveaway for all my channel members from the month of May. I do have some awesome prizes here. I'll show them off in a second, so you guys can kind of get excited for that giveaway later in the show. I had to do a stream for that reason. Doing streams has gotten really hard for me, and I do want to open up a tiny bit about that. Not a huge amount, but part of the reason I had medical appointments is I'm trying to get some stuff figured out to help me get motivated to have a better work ethic, to be a better YouTuber, to be a better person in general. Nothing super serious, but just some stuff that I've kind of found out about myself that I'm starting to get the ball rolling on getting help with, right? Stuff that I'm sure I'll talk about more when I actually have a definitive diagnosis and all that kind of fun stuff. But I got that ball rolling today. And so I wanted to, do a stream to kind of talk about some things that have been happening, to do that member giveaway. And also something that's been in the plans for a while, something I mentioned a couple weeks ago to Kyle here, is to have Kyle on so you guys can get a chance to ask Kyle some questions. You're going to hear me ask him some questions. And we'll kind of go over the history of maybe how we got started on Devil's Advocates and some more stuff about Kyle, so we can get a chance to know him better. As we're saying hi to Kyle and other people, let's give a shout out to GT Key Comic, who is in the chat holding it down. Been giving constant updates and thumbs ups and all kinds of stuff. I appreciate that. We also have Buddy in there as well. Thanks, Buddy, for all your support, your channel membership, and all of that too. Good luck tonight on the channel member giveaway. Speaking of channel member giveaway, I do want to just show off those prizes real quick, and then we'll get into the interview part of the show. So all channel members, everybody who's been a channel member in May is eligible to win these. I'm going to give myself the big kahuna screen here for a second. First up, we got first appearance of Night Spider, Edge of Spider-Verse. That's the actual Night Spider variant, so you get a chance to win that. Also, Edge of Spider-Verse, we got the newer series with the Spider-Rex cover there. It's pretty awesome. I just watched the Dune 2 teaser. Didn't really show much, and I've read Dune like a million times, so I'm not worried about spoilers or whatever. But I figured why not throw a Dune book in there? So that's Dune House Atreides #1. It's Pride Month, and I wanted to throw a Pride book in there. So we got This is the first year, I think, first year DC did Pride, or maybe it was the second year, 2022. I thought that was a gorgeous cover. Want to give that away as part of Pride Month, kind of honor that. Darkhawk #1, cool cover there. Batman Spawn #1, I love that cover. Love that crossover coming back. And then the final Raw comic book, anybody has a chance to win. That's the spoiler variant, which was featured on a stream of Devil's Advocates. So there you go, kind of a continuity show there, and also on the last time I did a live stream on this channel too. And then if you are a premium channel member, which is the $10 a month level, you get a chance to win the big prize tonight, which is this Batman Beyond cover. It's a 9.8 CBCS slab, Neo Year #1. So that is your big prize for the night if you're a $10 a month channel member. So if you guys want to become channel member, there is a join button down below, and I do use all that funding from that to do things like pay for like my cover price and CLZ and key collector memberships and Go Collect and stuff like that I use on the channel as well. So if you're kind of curious where that goes, plus I also pay for the prizes and the shipping and all that too, because you got to do that too. So yeah,
I'll tell you what we'll do.
Whoa, there we go.
For tonight, the EXP will pay for the winter shipping.
Whoa, that's awesome. Yeah, so there you go. And that's actually not only awesome, but a great segue to start talking to Kyle. Kyle is from the EXP. If you guys haven't, caught the Devil's Advocate streams that I've been doing, originally we were doing them on this channel and over on the EXP, and now those are exclusively streaming over on the EXP. Shameless plugs are always welcome. No shame plugs. And so we're going to get to know a little bit more about that. I got a few questions here that we're going to bring up for Kyle. So the first question that I'm going to ask Kyle, the first question I like to ask any comic book collector is, how did you start reading comic books, Kyle?
I didn't have a choice is the real short answer there. So my grandmother is in the hospital having my father, and my grandfather is bored. So he goes to the newsstand in the next door to the hospital in Columbus, Ohio, and buys 3 books off the shelf. One of those was Amazing Fantasy 15.
Wow.
And an obsession was born. And so since that day, my family has collected Spider-Man. And when I was old enough to be involved in that practice, it became my job. And then when I got a little older and I had my own money, it became really my job. So I started reading comic books almost immediately as soon as I could read. As soon as they knew I wouldn't tear the covers off of stuff, comic books were in my hand. Some of my earliest memories are, I wasn't a sickly child, but I was sick a lot. Of my mom buying Archies and things like that for me to read while I was like laid up in bed and stuff. And then I remember reading the first time a comic book ever really was like, oh crap, this might be too much for me, was there was a Scarecrow story in No Man's Land.
Mm-hmm.
And she bought it for me, and I was having terrible fevers, and I hallucinated a Scarecrow story. And I just remember freaking out and being like, I have to do this now. Like, this is my thing. Because things don't make me feel this way, but this does. And I was addicted to the adrenaline. So that's kind of my comic book reading origin story. It was never really a thing that wasn't going to happen.
So I just reread No Man's Land like last year, and the Scarecrow stuff in that was pretty interesting.
Right. And as like a 5-year-old, maybe a little much.
Yeah, one of my earliest like traumatic exposure to media memories is I was probably about 6, and my parents turned on this little movie called Predator. And, sci-fi action movie. My mom loves science fiction, that kind of stuff. It's where that stuff comes from for me. And, like early on in the movie, you got the skinned bodies hanging from the trees, and, that didn't stop them.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stories where it's, don't tell your mother.
Yeah.
I saw Nosferatu way too young.
There
in
you
the
go.
original It and some of that stuff. So that really kind of formed that. And then I was probably 6 or 7 the first time I read Preacher.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, and my dad's like, it's a comic book. What can it hurt?
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
he starts flipping through it and sees in that first book where the angel and the demon are, doing it.
Yeah,
And he goes, look, if you ever tell your mother I let you read this, you're going to have to sleep in the backyard. Got it.
that's awesome. So I mean, it's really cool hearing like how involved your family has been in comic books. That man, picking up an AF-15 as some light reading material and having that be your exposure, that would be crazy. And then having that passed down and
What's nuts is we still own it.
yeah. When did I hear you say once your family owns multiple copies?
3 of them.
Wow. When was, so not to get too far down that path, but when was the most recent one acquired?
2017.
Okay. And then I assume the second one kind of obviously somewhere in the middle there,
It was
right?
in the 80s.
Okay. So back when it was,
and I'll be honest, in my
somewhat
life, I've only seen that first copy one time.
okay.
It lives in a bank in Columbus, Ohio. Like,
Yeah.
As does the second one, and now as does the third one.
All in the same bank?
Yeah, they're all in the same safe deposit box.
Ooh.
Uh-huh.
That makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, it's one of those things is that they're well protected, they're well taken care of.
Yeah.
They're in the same safe deposit box. There's a lot in that safe deposit box. It's a pretty big,
Yeah.
almost like a Foot Locker at this point of stuff.
That's crazy. That's such a cool, crazy in a cool way, obviously. It does make me wonder, and like this is kind of where I'll reveal a little bit of that kind of interesting thing here, which is, to be honest with you guys, I don't really know Kyle all that well outside of the show we do together, right? Like what happened is, and I'll kind of let people know this part of it is, if you guys don't know, Nick Barucci is heavily involved with EXP. He's one of the founders of the EXP. Nick Barucci of Dynamite and Dynamic Forces. And he and I had talked a few times, we had a few phone conversations, and he said at one point, I'd love to have you involved in the channel. I'd love to have you do something. And he said, I have a guy that works for me. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I have Kyle who says that I asked him who his dream co-host would be, and your name came up, is what he told me. And I said, that's very flattering. That's awesome. I unfortunately don't know Kyle, but you know what? Anybody who would say that about me, I'm probably going to get along with just fine.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, I was a sub of the channel before I knew what your name was.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of those things, like, I would sub the channel, and while I'm working on content for the experience, or I'm reading comics, or I'm making lunch at home, I throw on my comic book YouTubers and just kind of listen to what they're saying. It's almost like it's a podcast. And so I forget what even show it was that got me to call Nick. Oh, you were talking about Acetate Gate.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And I called Nick and said, hey, we're talking about, I've been doing a show called Hot Takes for a couple of months. And I go, we've been talking about what we wanted to do, because that show was never supposed to last.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a fill-in. We need to fill this hour show. That was a play on a show I had done when I did Sports Talk Radio. And I go, what if we had, the original pitch was a revolving door kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
You 1 week, maybe Nick 1 week, maybe Dan 1 week. Dan Wickline from, he's a writer. He wrote 30 Days a Night. He did a book at Dynamite called Karma. He's done all the Dynamite books, the prose stories that are based on the Dynamite characters. And he does a lot on the experience. And, if we could just get one a week and we just rotate through, and then once a month I do it solo and we're good. And he goes, well, let me talk to Bronze Age Nerd and we'll see what happens. And he comes back and said, he'd be interested in talking. And we kind of talked about the idea of what we were going to do. And it just kind of made sense. We seemed to have similar vibe in that regard. Yeah. So it just made sense to be like, okay, let's end the one show and develop something with Chris to do as our own show. So that's kind of how that came about. It was really organic and quick. Actually, we started having the conversation, then like 3 weeks later, you and I are on the phone going, when you want to start this thing?
Yep. And I mean, in that meantime, I went and checked out a couple of the recent, at the time, the more recent hot takes streams. It was like, okay, I can totally see where like we're gonna have some fun having some conversations. And to me, it was just kind of it was a slam dunk idea. I've been a big fan of what the EXP is doing for a while. Didn't really know, if there's a way for me to get involved and if I could work it into my schedule. But luckily, we were able to knock down those barriers, and the rest is history. And we've kind of been doing this for a while now. But it's great to finally be here and have a chance to talk outside of major comics are burning down news or the episodes, to get that chance to kind of get to know you a little bit better and kind of reveal the audience here. It's not like I've had like these long behind the scenes conversations with Kyle. We've had a couple conversations, of course, but nothing too crazy about getting to know each other. So one thing that I've picked up on, you've talked about your convention experience. You've talked about family business. You've talked about being at conventions for industry related, as a vendor, as a fan, etc. So what is your comic book industry experience? Like, how did that start?
It's a circuitous story.
Okay.
So when I was 13 years old, I got in the music business, started traveling, playing music and that kind of stuff, graduated high school and left home and was a musician. And the one thing that was always a thing for me is I always had a pull list at a comic shop here in town or nearby wherever I was living at the time, because I was always reading comics.
Yeah.
I went through some stuff in my life that, we don't really need to dive into too deep unless people want to, with drugs and alcohol and things like that. And I was in a dark place and I moved home, got out of that business and moved home. And I got a job working for the local iHeartMedia radio station. Mm-hmm. I have a degree in broadcast communications, degree in graphic design for media and some of these things. And then that played into moving into working for the local CBS affiliate, working for ESPN, and then working for Fox Sports Radio. At the same time, I'm like, my comic addiction, now that I'm stationary, is becoming incredibly expensive. I had like a $200 a week pull list at one point.
Yeah.
And I went into my local comic shop and the guy had a sign on the door that says, now hiring, looking for weekend help. And I didn't work weekends. So I said, hey, I'll make you a deal. I will work for my pull list. I'll come in Tuesday nights and help you put out the new books. I'll work Saturday and Sunday for my pull list. Okay. And so I started working for the store, and I'd been there maybe a year when the guy who owned the building we were in said, I'm selling the building. I'm buying you out of your lease. You need to move. And the guy who owned the store says to me, we have to move. We're going to move, but I'd like to add Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and some of this other stuff to the shop. But he didn't have the capital. What they were paying him to get out of his lease and that kind of stuff, he didn't have the capital. So I invested. I threw some money in and was able to up our gaming, and we added Dungeons and Dragons and all that kind of stuff because that's what I was into.
Yeah.
And so I became partners in the store where I was still just basically working for my pull list. 2017 rolls around, and my contract was up at ESPN Radio, and some things were happening in the industry at the time, and I was unceremoniously let go.
Okay.
They didn't renew my contract. I had 6 months on my contract and they let me go. Anyway, I go to the shop and I go, well, I'm out of work. I'm going to come hang out a little more until I find a job. And he goes, well, I have this opportunity to go to Japan and teach English as a second language. And, I'm going to close the store. And I go, well, what if I bought the store? And he goes, what? And I go, yeah, I'm going to buy the store. I gave it no thought. I didn't ask to see the books. I didn't ask for anything. I just was like, I need a job. I know what I'll do. I'll sell comics.
There you go.
So I bought Sean's Anime and Comics in Sylvania, Ohio, in 2017.
Okay.
We were there until fall of 2019 when we moved to. I had the opportunity to buy a building. It was a lease to own deal. Buy the building, rent it for a year, and then buy it for the remainder of the value after 1 year. Well, that was fall of 2019. We all know what happened spring of 2020.
Yeah.
So I was in a situation where I either had to spend about $100,000 on a building or close because I couldn't continue leasing. That was the deal. So I closed my store at the beginning of the pandemic and became online only, and that kind of stuff. I've done conventions and I've done all kinds of stuff in the industry since 2017 full time. I've been working in the comic book business in some form or another for this would be my 15th year.
Okay. Did you keep the name when you
when we moved? No, we changed the name because I got tired of people thinking I was called Sean.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and I moved into the building was right across the street from a high school. I was so excited to be right across the street from my high school. My neighbor was an ice cream store. I'm like, this is perfect. What I didn't know was that the high school was under construction and no one was going there.
Oh.
And the ice cream store didn't open that year. Oh, well, I should have done some more research. I made some bad decisions back then. But the reality of the story, the reality of that whole thing is that I now get to, through that, I made a lot of friends.
Mm.
And through that, I get to be in the industry in a different kind of way, in a way that I'm much more comfortable being. I was never good at balancing my budget and making my diamond orders on time. And my brain isn't in that. My brain is, hey, did you guys read the new TMNT? Hey, do you know what's happening in Void Rivals? That was always my strong suit. So now I get to do that in other ways. I get to work with Comics Pro instead of attending Comics Pro.
Right.
I get to work with Diamond instead of being a Diamond customer, that kind of thing. And I get to see the industry from 30,000 feet as opposed to being in the dirt.
It's funny when you say about the diamond orders and all that. Like I have noticed, and it's not really like a revelation, but I think it's something a lot of people don't actually verbalize. So many, and I'm not like totally lumping you in this category either, but so many comic shop owners had that dream of being a comic shop owner, but not really the reality of the nuts and bolts of running it. Like that wasn't their dream. It was talking to customers about the comics, or just having a lot of comics, or having a place to sell all their comics, or all various different things.
I wanted to be Randall from Clerks, not the guy who owned the video shop.
Right.
Yeah. And so as I look towards the future, and like this is something that I'm really vocalizing in public right now for the first time, looking at reopening or opening a new store in maybe like 2025, starting to look at getting the financing together and things like that. That's going to happen when I find a person who can do the books and make the math, so I could just talk about comicses.
You need a Dante for your Randall.
Right. I don't the experience exists. I'm not going to stop doing the experience because I have a comic shop. So I need someone who can make the comic shop make sense.
Yeah.
And then let me be the guy who goes, hey, I think you're going to like this book from this publisher you've never heard of. Because that's what I was good at. So,
I mean, a lot of successful shops I've been in have that dynamic too, where there is kind of like, the person that maybe either put up the money, and maybe they're the person that run the day-to-day, or maybe they're the idea person or whatever, or the customer facing person. And then somebody who's, doing the other side of the role there. I think that's a good formula. I'm going to say hi to Phil real fast because he popped in. Thanks for being a channel member, Phil. I appreciate it. And hi to everybody else too. I've been popping up your messages, but just not trying to interrupt the conversation, but hi to all of you for being in here. I appreciate it. I am going to pop in with this question because this is a good question. Comics and Tortillas asks, top comic you guys read this week? And Kyle, I'll let you go first.
You're going to ask me a question with which I can't answer. Um,
I'm not gonna be able to answer it either.
I
That's the spoiler
will I'm gonna give you two.
alert. Okay.
Betty Page #1 from Dynamite.
Really interesting.
It's not the best Betty Page story that Dynamite's done in the last year and a half, but it's different than every Betty Page story they've done in the last little while. It really feels like what would happen if Betty Page existed in the Archie universe.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Because like the writing is a little bit more light, and the art style is that real thick kind of outline, sort of 4-color funnies art.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it because it just was a departure. The other one for me, and a lot of people aren't loving it, but I'm loving it, is TMNT 140.
Okay.
And you're going to find, as we talk through this, y'all, as you get to know me, are going to find out about my love for the Turtles. Turtles are a big part of my life. And so the thing about TMNT 140 is we're coming out of the Armageddon game, which was a wildly disappointing 22 book event that took 17 books before anything happened. It happened for 3 pages and then nothing else happened.
Yeah.
This is a real good pickup. It's a jump in point, and it's the debut of the new ongoing interior artist, Gavin Smith, who's a dear friend. In fact, he drew both of these.
Okay.
And several other things around my office here. But I really like his art style, and I thought the story was a good, like, lemon sorbet when you're at like a tasting of some kind. It's a good palate cleanser.
Yeah.
You know, not a lot happens. It's a lot of, dialogue driven, and it kind of feels like not another teen movie.
Okay.
But it's a good, okay, you haven't read Turtles in 5 years and you want to jump back in. Here's where you can.
I like those jumping on points when they happen, if they're done well, of course. Figure Drawing says TMNT Gamora crossover, please.
See, I want more of this story, which is TMNT Ghostbusters.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And this is just after Donnie had died. So he drew the Ghostbusters busting the ghost.
Nice. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll throw out my answer there, Comics and Tortillas. So here's the answer for me. I'll tackle this as quickly as I can. I don't have an LCS around me, so I do all of my comic book ordering online. So I primarily go through Things from Their World, Comic Corner, and Dangerous Waters Comics and More are kind of my 3 shops I use. And I get my stuff usually well after release. So since that's been the case for a few years now, so what I've kind of switched over to doing is a lot of stuff like Marvel Unlimited, and I just don't care about being behind, and I just read stuff from behind. So to answer your question, what was the top comic I read this week? So far, I've been kind of working my way through the Krakoa era stuff of X-Men, because I would love to do a video that's kind of a like a retrospective on what's happened with the Krakoa era. So I'm sticking with it, even though the best stuff is behind us so far. So I've been reading like Legion of X and New Mutants and kind of working through those runs. I was trying to read it in order like they have in the back of the issues, but my God, is that tedious when you're on the app. So I kind of just will batch through a few issues at a time. I've actually been enjoying Legion of X. I think I read issue like 7 or something last night. Kind of interested in that story. I think the dynamic between Charles and David is really fascinating. So that's kind of my answer.
And I will say this, I will caveat my answers with, I have not yet read Void Rivals. I forgot to add it to my pull list.
Oh no.
So, and my LCS and the other 2 LCSs that I visited had sold out. So I have one coming from Jen King at Space Cadets Collection in Houston, Texas. But I don't have it yet, so I can't read it.
Gotcha. And even though, it's in the thumbnail and you guys will see us talking about it later on, it's the information's out there. We are going to talk about Void Rivals and kind of it's on posters and stuff that they've released, and it's pretty much in the press release. And I will talk about that. So there will be some slight spoilers for Void Rivals if you don't already know what's going on. Again, neither of us has read it. We're not going to go into gory detail about what happens. I will also say, if you're in chat, please no spoilers for Transformers Rise of the Beast. I know there's some spoilers related to that. I know what they are. Kyle and I talked about it before the show. Neither of us has seen the movie. I don't think he's planning on it. I'm going to wait a long time to watch it probably. But I do know what happened, and let's just kind of avoid talking about it since that movie is still brand new to theaters, and that's kind of my spoiler policy. Yeah, Legion Quest was great. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it gave some insight into both of our collecting and reading styles too, which is great.
I have a question for Comics and Tortillas. Do you have a channel where you review comics and tell me how to make better tacos or other types of food that you use tortillas? Because if so, I will thank you.
I'm just hoping that it's not some weird hybrid channel where the tortilla is made of comics or something. I'm just crossing my fingers that that's not the case.
So I haven't eaten since about noon today because I had to have a test.
Yeah.
And so I'm starving, and the idea of reading a comic while eating some tacos or burritos is like, whew, I'm shaking a little thinking about it.
Yeah, I didn't eat till like 2:00 today. I just kind of skipped breakfast and lunch because I had to do some lab work and stuff. So I gorged myself on some teriyaki for food tonight. So that was good. There we go. Well, you do have a channel and a podcast. I love comics and I love tortillas. That's great, man. I don't think you'll be able to post a link in a chat, but feel free to, I'm assuming your channel is called Comics and Tortillas. It'd be weird if it wasn't. So yeah, there you go, man. Go check out Comics and Tortillas. See, tacos they're everywhere, man. They're so good. They're so good. There's a place
I got
here
you with the link, by the way.
Oh, nice. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's true. You're not wrong. So moving on to our next question, I do want to, kind of get through the foundational questions here. Kyle, what is your favorite like story arc, series, miniseries, maxi series, like a self-contained story within comic books? Could be a single issue. Which one do you like find yourself picking up and reading the most, or which one do you have the fondest memory of?
Return to New York, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay, there we go. Kind of figured that it would involve TMNT or Spider-Man. I was not proven wrong.
Yeah, no. Return to New York, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Cool.
Is my favorite story arc of all time. But that's one of those questions that's like, well, which kid is your favorite?
Yeah.
Or, who do you like better, your kid or your wife?
No, that's the next question.
Like, it's real tough, right? But that is one of those formulaic kind of, it super fit like with what I was going through when I read it and what I was into when I read it. And I just remember being like, this feels like a warm blankie.
Yeah.
It shouldn't, because I mean, let's be real, that series got some stuff, but it felt like home. So
nice. Yeah, that definitely tracks. Figure Drawing has a great follow-up question, which will pre-cut my favorite child question. Your favorite TMNT movie? Holy shit, Figure, you stumped him.
The animated series.
That's not a movie.
I know.
That's not a movie at all.
I know. It's hard not to say the first one, but I really enjoyed the animated one that they put out a couple years back with Nickelodeon, because that was the reason I enjoyed that maybe wasn't so much the story or the movie itself, but it was I got to take my nephews, who were both pretty young at the time, and be like, look, those comics Uncle Kyle won't let you touch?
Yeah.
It's this. So it's for me, it's always going to be that very first live action TMNT movie, because that was just such a moment in my childhood. Look, Super Shredder, aka Big Diesel, aka your Kevin Nash's of it all. I got a story about that too, but the first one was so important to my childhood, and then the animated one allowed me to share my fandom with my nephews, who are they're the only people on the planet I actually like. So, or they're the people on the planet I guess I like the most. So those are my answers.
Okay.
A few years ago, I was working at a convention. I was volunteering, and I got to be Scott Hall and Kevin Nash's body man. So I got to sit at their table and take the money and make sure that they had everything they needed. And talking to Kevin Nash about being Super Shredder for 3 days. I'm shocked he didn't power bomb me.
I was gonna say, like, look, dude, it was like, it was 20 years ago. It was 3 weeks of work or whatever.
Right. I mean, we talked a lot about wrestling. I'm a big wrestling fan. And the three of us and Booker T and Ryan Hurst and Jay Adams, who's Ryan Hurst's body double. So 3 guys who are all 6'2" or bigger, 300 pounds or bigger, went to an all-you-could-eat crab place, and I think we put it out of business. So, that was another good story from that weekend. But boy, oh boy, getting to talk to him about being Super Shredder was one of the highlights of my life.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's really cool. I would hope to meet James Marsden someday and ask him what it was like to be made fun of in several X-Men movies.
I would want to know what it was like to be made fun of in that Jury Duty show for having been in several X-Men movies.
Yeah, that's true. That's true too. I did want to say hello to the Mad Spidey, our Australian YouTube friend. Mad Spidey, I mentioned this on a stream you were in a while ago, and I've neglected to follow up with you. We need to talk soon. I would love to have you on the show. You are an original art maestro. I would love to have you on and talk about that, man. So I need to hit you up soon and see if you're willing to do that still. I think that would be a great show.
I just bought my first original TMNT cover.
Okay. Which one?
It was TMNT Last Ronin Volume 2, Number 1. It was inked by Jason Moore. I bought it from Jason Moore. I don't remember which cover it was. I think it was the B.
Okay.
So,
well, congratulations, man. I this is something I've talked about with Mad Spidey. I have yet to add any original art to my collection. With one, I mean, if you count a remark, I've got one, which is actually a TMNT book. So
I have 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pages hanging up on the wall right now. I've got another 10 pages here currently waiting to be framed. Another 4 pages on the way. Jason Moore is the man. K-pop. I love Jason. Genuinely sweet dude. So yeah, if you count remarks and commission cover art and signed animation cells from TMNT cartoon shows and Ghostbusters cartoon shows, I can't count all the art I have hanging in my office right now.
Nice.
One of them is falling down and it's freaking me out.
So would you say was real Ghostbusters cells?
Yeah, real Ghostbusters.
Nice. That would be something I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I got a Janine hugging Slimer that's signed by Annie Potts.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And K-pop, to your comment, I just have to say, well, I'm sorry, it was expensive piece. To reference that scene in Grandma's Boy. Oh, nice.
So K-pop and I must not be far from each other because Jason lives like 15 minutes from me. So,
yeah, I think you guys are kind of, well, I mean, I'll hear without doxing anybody on purpose. I'll just say that you're on the correct side of the country.
Wow.
I think that's generic enough.
Right. Like K-pop, will I run into you at Monroe Pop Fest?
So there you go. We'll see what she has to say. So I got to get back to this favorite child question. And what I mean by that is I have bad news, Kyle. Your house is currently on fire. You have time to save one comic book before you leave. Only one, no cheating. Which one would you grab if you can magically have it at your fingertips?
So I don't keep any of my real high valued, important to me comics in my home.
Okay.
I either have them in safe deposit box. I have one in Columbus. I have one here locally that I keep stuff in. I keep them here in my office in a fireproof gun safe.
Mm-hmm.
That's in my audio recording studio. over here that I used to set my laptop on so I can read my copy. In my house, though, I have what I call the Go Box.
Yep.
It is a short box of comics that lives by the door to my room, that if my house is on fire, the Go Box goes with me.
Makes sense.
And it's Sandman volumes 1 and 2 are in there. It's a lot of stuff that's in the box that is stuff I reread constantly.
Yeah.
So it's my 3rd, 4th, 5th copies of some of those early Spider-Man books, some trades. So to grab one, I couldn't say which one I would grab, but I would grab the box and huck it out the window and go after it.
Okay. A little bit of cheating there, but I'll allow it.
Well, because for years I didn't keep any comics at home. I kept them in the store, in the safe at the store, and places like that. So it just became I don't keep comics at home. There are little hands and things that are nephews that will touch my stuff and don't touch my stuff.
Yeah, a lot of my parenting skills have been directed towards explaining to my daughter how important comic books are and why you should never touch them until I say you can.
Don't touch my stuff.
But which I've also, I say that for humor, because people are literal on the internet. I have to also explain that I have a whole bunch of comic books that are just hers that she can do whatever she wants with.
I will say that sitting at home on my desk right now is a TMNT RAF one-shots, the first appearance of Casey Jones that I just got back from CGC.
Okay.
That would be, I would forego the Go Box to save that, but that's only there until it comes to the office tomorrow.
Well, look, the good news here is you got some help.
Right? Right. K-pop's going to come through the window and be like, what do I need to get?
She's got your back, dude. Don't worry.
There is a pop culture thing, though, that I would forego the Go Box for too.
Oh, let's hear it.
Which is, I have a 1/10 scale replica of Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors that was made for me by the sculptor who sculpted the original plant for the Little Shop of Horrors movie. It was a gift that a bunch of my friends went in together and got me for my 30th birthday.
That's cool.
So I'm definitely saving that and letting the comics die.
So you mentioned things that terrified you as a kid with Scarecrow and stuff. No Man's Land. Actually, Little Shop of Horrors is one of those ones for me that when I watched as a kid, I was like, this is just weird and creepy. And
yes,
I actually need to rewatch that, because going back and seeing things like that, like you mentioned the original It earlier, going back and watching that as an adult, it's like not scary at all now. So it really kind of, for me at least, it like does this thing where it kind of demystifies that, and it's kind of like facing your fears in a weird way. I love doing that stuff.
Well, and I was a huge musical theater kid, and that was my favorite.
Yeah.
So like
makes sense.
it's this. I don't have the tattoo yet, but I will soon have the tattoo of Suddenly Seymour. So
nice.
And yeah, I mean, Steve Martin,
early Steve Martin is just, I mean, like, not there's anything wrong with later Steve Martin, but just early Steve Martin is one of those things that, there's certain things, like going back and watching Chevy Chase has a different feel now. Going back and watching, some of these other people that were, even Bill Murray, there's been some kind of shading of his whole career, but Steve Martin's one of those ones I can still go back and watch that early stuff and just absolutely just, disappear for a couple hours or whatever, watching The Jerk or whatever it is. Love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Tim Curry is an absolute genius.
He is amazing. He is amazing. This question is one of my favorite questions to ask people that I know have been in comic books or been in industry and have strong opinions. So I think it's a perfect question for you. If you could change something about comic book collecting or the comic book industry, your choice, what would be the one thing you'd want to change and why?
I have a couple of answers, but I'm going to go with this one. I would remove Comicsgate from our collective consciousness. No one had a problem with Black Widow or other female superheroes until all of a sudden, why are we making superheroes girls? Right? Like nobody had a problem. And then all of a sudden, everybody has a problem. So I would go back and return the industry to a time before that whole mishigas happened and let things progress as they should have.
Yeah.
Because I think what wound up happening was stories were made weaker for fear of public pressure that could have been great, and long-term plans were abandoned in order to move away from them. And I would have liked to have seen what those plans were, because I think it would have made a lot of companies a lot stronger and a lot more profitable. One of the big problems we have in this industry is the average reader is getting older and we're not gaining new readers.
100%.
And part of that is we're not making content that appeals to new readers.
Yep.
I mean, we just killed Miss Marvel. How many 14-year-old girls are devastated by that? Not nearly as many as could have been. Which, you know, as someone who still gets emotional about the death of Gwen Stacy, like, you know, it could have been it could have hit different.
Yeah.
So my thing would be to go back and just remove that from the entire zeitgeist.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, the whole Comicsgate thing is something that it's such a weird thing for me, because it kind of rose to prominence. Like, I've had two main breaks in comic book collecting, and the second break coincided a lot with the kind of rise of that movement, or whatever you want to call it, that's gained in popularity. And it is interesting to me, because you touched on something that I've kind of suspected and thought about for a while, which is it's almost like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy kind of happened, in a way where it's like the stuff that they believe or were speaking out against, which, hey, you know what? I'm a big believer that people have the right to say whatever they want. I don't have to agree with them. I want people to have different opinions. I hope that those opinions are inclusive of everybody out there. But I you know, you can't be thought police and say, like, you can't think this way or that way, in my opinion, either. But in them putting out those kind of ideas and really providing a market force on the industry that's going to say, we're not going to buy your books if you do this, that, or the other thing, it's kind of created this weird dichotomy where, like you talked about, some storylines probably never got fleshed out the way they should have, or companies have taken safer routes in a lot of ways, I feel like, with their storytelling, which to me is one of the most dangerous things in not just comic books, but also I think you can roll right in and say genre style movies right now, or, you know, whether those are comic book movies or science fiction or fantasy type movies as well, new IPs that come out, are, you know, video games too. They're taking like this almost safer approach because of it. And then at the same time, and this is one of those really difficult things for me, because I don't want this to come across negatively to anybody. I do feel like there is almost like any word I use is going to be the wrong word, but the word I think of is almost like a tokenism, where there is kind of like this feeling that we need to have characters of all walks, you know, replacing certain characters or any of this kind of stuff, which I understand why that's, you know, if you're a huge Spider-Man fan and you find out Spider-Man's being replaced by a different character in a movie or something like that, that didn't actually happen. But if that did happen, I can understand why somebody might have an issue with that. The one that I've brought up an example for, my favorite character is Cyclops. If all of a sudden I find out Cyclops is some kind of different representation for a movie, I'm going to feel very strangely about that. I'm not going to necessarily boycott the movie or, you know, raise a stinking fit. I'm going to watch it and see what I think and, you know, kind of go through all that process. But that's a character I've identified with for 30 plus years. And I've been, you know, dying to see like a really cool interpretation of the person that I identified a lot with as a kid. At the same time, and this is where I kind of have to say this part, I want people who come from different walks of life than me to have those kinds of characters that they can feel that way about too.
Right.
And I do think that there's a way for kind of everybody to really kind of have their way almost, to have characters that are for them, but also to honor legacy characters. And, you know, at the same time, legacy characters need to change from time to time. Otherwise, they're just this static character for 60, 70, 80 years that, you know, people love to talk about like, well, you know, Batman's always been Batman. No, he hasn't. The current Batman is nothing like the original Batman. That character has evolved multiple times. Now, the current version of the character has been sort of like that for a long time now, so it sort of feels that way to most of us.
Right.
But that's something, you know, comics have to evolve, and I'm it's a delicate thing because it's so easy to offend somebody on different sides when you talk about that stuff, but it is an interesting approach, and it's something that I would love to see the kind of what if scenario of how that played out. So that's a great answer, man.
I said to somebody earlier today, the problem with gatekeeping, which is what in a really basic sense that whole movement was, is that there are only two outcomes. Either you keep everybody who isn't already in out, or you wall yourself off from anything that isn't already what exists, and you starve yourself out. It's a reason that we no longer build castles to defend communities, because it's really easy to get trapped.
Yep.
And at the same time, if you keep everybody else out, all of a sudden you're just feeding on yourself. So
Totally.
That's my answer for what I would change in the comic book industry. If you want to hear me rant about speculation and some of the, you know, the terrible, terrible practices that distributors have and some of this other stuff, I can do that, but that's the one thing that I think would instantly flip a switch in this industry, is to get rid of the gatekeeping.
I love this comment too. The more we can let go of continuity and specifics, the more our characters and stories can evolve. Batman is whoever you want him to be. Pick your favorite stories that are Batman to you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for that too. Man, we could talk that. I something that I do actually want to talk about at some point, because I've had a lot of thoughts on it for a while, but I will derail the entire itinerary if I go too far into it.
You know, I'll caveat some of what I'm saying by this is I'm that guy who is already mad at the new Captain America for calling it after a comic book and then not making the story of the comic book.
Yeah.
I'm also that guy.
Yep.
So,
and that's actually, it's weird. Like I have like I don't know what specific ism there is in me that causes this. But when I see something get adapted, I've grown to be okay with what most of the MCU has done. Because they're kind of telling, I view it as almost like the ultimate universe or something like that, where it's kind of like its own thing. And I've been pretty cool with it for the most part. But when I think of a comic book movie, some of my favorite ones are things like Sin City.
right.
I'll even throw, even though they did change the third act drastically, I'll throw Watchmen out there as well. But some of these things that have been very, 300, they've been very loyal to the source material. And those are some of my favorite experiences, because when I read a comic book, I wonder what it would be like as a movie. And some of these adaptations that are so drastically different than the source material, I'm not saying they're not good stories as well. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But part of me always wonders, like, like we're talking about making this X-Men, introducing the MCU. Part of me almost just wishes, like, just fuck everything and just go straight to the story. Like, go straight, just who cares if you have to know the 300 issues that came before it? If you translated Fatal Attractions into a story and just threw that on the movie, and all of a sudden the X-Men are flying up to Asteroid M and Wolverine's getting his adamantium ripped out, and like all these crazy, like, I'm not saying that like everybody wouldn't be like, what the hell just happened? But let's face it, in today's audiences, a lot of them are like, what the hell just happened anyway?
Right.
It'd be so cool to see.
For me, it goes back to, you don't call a movie Civil War and then not tell the Civil War story.
Yeah, that's a comment you made before, and I completely agree. It's like, I mean, just from the jump, it's completely different. It's a cool story on its own, but it's not the same story.
Right.
I mean, let's put it this way. If you don't have a negative zone prison with, like, all the heroes locked up in it at some point, you're not really doing that story justice. It felt like a, if they would have turned that into like a 3-movie series, maybe they could have gotten closer to that storyline. But I still enjoyed Civil War. It's one of my favorite Captain America movies. But yeah, you got to kind of ignore the title when you watch it. So here's a question that I have been dying to ask you. It's the question in here that I wanted to know the most with, and that is, So we talked about the EXP earlier. If you guys aren't subscribed to the EXP, go check them out on YouTube here. It's a great channel, and I'm on there on Monday nights with Kyle doing Devil's Advocates.
10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific.
New time slot for the show. We're going a little bit later. Great topic for next week that I'm so excited to tackle, which is the kind of the title.
How many boobs are too many boobs?
How many boobs are too many boobs? It's the war on adult comics. It's going to be a killer episode. I've got a shit ton of stuff to say about it. So I'm excited for that one. But when it comes to the EXP, you're the executive producer over there, right?
I am.
How did your involvement with EXP start? Like, what was the origin story there of you working with Nick and Jenna and all them?
So the EXP was born out of something else, actually. So there are two parts to this story, and they're both equally important. When I had my comic book store, I got involved in the Comic Book Shopping Network. If you don't know what that is, it's a Facebook group where vetted sellers from all around the country go live on Facebook and sell comics to everybody else. Anybody who can who joins the group and gets vetted to join the group can buy comics. And I, at some point, took over doing things like the schedule for CBSN. And it grew and grew and grew to the point where I needed to step away from CBSN because other things were happening. And that is about the time the pandemic hit.
Right.
So I closed my store March 29th, 2020. March 29th, I hosted a hybrid Comic-Con. I was supposed to have a big signing that weekend in my store to celebrate my birthday. And it was my business partner's 30th.
Oh, cool.
At that point. And so it was going to be a big to-do. And we turned it into a virtual thing called the Party for the End of the World, which is a reference to the show Parks and Recreation. We even got Zorp from Parks and Rec, and it was our logo and everything.
Nice.
But that really gave me the groundwork for the virtual convention concept. And so I reached out to Cherry Capital Comic Con, which is a convention that I'd vended at for years and was good friends with. And we did something called Garage Con, which was my store and Cherry Capital Comic Con and Traverse City Stop Comics doing a virtual convention together. And then Jen and I did Cadets Con, which is her in-store convention that she always ran, but doing it virtually.
Okay.
And not long after Cadets Con, I got contacted by the Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum in Baltimore. And I did their virtual festival. And so I was really kind of carving out a niche doing virtual conventions. And I get a call from Jen one day, and she says, "Hey, me and Jesse are talking about launching a new thing. And we've got Nick on board. And can you come to the meeting? We think your input is going to be important." Sure, whatever. I owe Jen and Jesse a lot, so I'm glad to show. And in that meeting, they kind of spelled out their vision for the experience, that it was going to be part QVC, HSN, part entertainment, but they didn't know what that was going to look like. And there was me and another guy who were going to be, he was going to be the EP, and I was going to be the technical director. I was going to oversee, this is the tech, this is how the tech works.
Right.
And he was going to be in charge of content. He very early on made it super clear that he wanted to be able to do super controversial content. He wanted to be able to have people who were involved with the movement we just mentioned on the air. He wanted to have people who didn't necessarily like the founders of the thing on the air because he knew it would draw viewers.
Okay.
And he also he just made some bad business decisions. We'll leave it at that. And the whole thing almost died before it started because he was removed. He was no longer involved. And so I put together in an afternoon the pitch for what is the experience. And took it to the three of them, and they're like, okay, you can be the executive producer and technical director, which I wish I would have thought that through, but I took the job. I didn't realize how little sleep that would mean. But basically the experience is the line I give to people is the local comic shop is the cornerstone of our fandom. Going into your local comic shop and having that, for lack of a better word, experience of talking to other nerds about the things you care about is super important.
Yeah.
To our fandom. And we live in a time now where, because of live chat, because of technological advances, you don't actually have to leave your couch to have these experiences. Right? I don't know how many of you are watching on your phone while sitting in your easy chairs, sitting on your couch, laying in bed, whatever you're doing. Here you are. So the pitch was to build a 50-50 split, sales and entertainment, where it's the conversations you have about, well, who is the best Power Ranger in the new Power Rangers book? And, you know, should Peter really have hung around with MJ? You know, these conversations you have in comic shops here in the virtual world.
Yeah.
And we launched in January of 2021 with our EXP Expo, which is our virtual convention. And we had John Romita Jr. We had a ton of great creators and independent creators and a bunch of people on to kind of launch the experience. And we've been live 6 or 7 days a week since then with no breaks. So,
wow. And I mean, to me, it's just it's a cool concept. And it's this thing where, like, you know, I've obviously done a YouTube channel and started one and had to, you know, work to grow it and everything. And it's something that a lot of people, I think, take for granted sometimes, but and I know, like, you know, people have goals and they want to be certain amounts of successful and all that kind of stuff.
right, everybody wants to be Mr. Beast.
Right. Exactly. Which is funny because nobody in comic books is 1/10 of what Mr. Beast is on YouTube, which is always great to think about. But yeah, it's kind of like what K-pop's saying here. You should be proud of the XP. It's a great place to hang. She says she lurks in there often.
Lurk less, say hi.
And it's just one of those things where it's kind of incredible. I mean, you guys are over, I think, 1,100 subscribers over there.
We're 1,790.
Okay,
there you go. Today.
There you go. And I mean, that's just one stream too, because the cool thing that the EXP does, which, you know, something that more
I might have buried the lead on that deal.
Uh-oh.
Well, no, it's that we are Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Yes.
And coming soon, TikTok and Instagram.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, it is that kind of almost like a shotgun approach, right? Like where you're on all the different social networks, which I think sometimes maybe makes it look even maybe a little, because it's kind of hard to see sometimes if you're, like, let's say you're just watching on YouTube, you don't really understand, like, it is actually also going out to these other services and you are watching with other people. And it's, you know, sometimes, unfortunately, due to sometimes how the technology works, it might seem a little more segmented than it actually is. But I think you guys should be really proud of what's going on over there. I dare say, you know, us, since I'm now part of that as well, and really excited to watch it grow and continue to evolve. I know there's, you know, cool plans and whatever. I'm not going to put you on the spot to talk about those or whatever, but I do think it's going to be exciting.
We have big changes on the horizon. Like, I'm not worried about putting myself on blast on that one. It's we're making some changes. Bronze and a few other people we know who are successful here on YouTube have given us some really good advice about kind of a way forward. I said when we started that we have to pave the road, but we still have to clear the trees. Like, where we're going, nobody's gone before.
Yeah.
Most comic book YouTubers are doing what we call entertainment content. They're making in a month the amount of content we make in a day, which isn't wrong. In fact, it's
Yeah.
better, it turns out, than what we do.
Yeah.
But we spent so much time clearing the forest and trying to pave the road that we needed somebody to be like, hey, do this and it'll work. And so we have big changes coming, and they're going to really kind of, I think, revolutionize, and maybe overselling, but revolutionize the way we approach not only the experience, but I think it's going to cause other people to have to kind of think about the way they approach comic book entertainment and live selling.
Yeah.
Without going too deep into the weeds, Chris and I moving an hour back is not just something we're doing to make our schedule easier. In fact, it makes my schedule significantly harder. But it does things that I think will enable us to really kind of make the experience into a force in the industry that it has been, but it has been kind of under the radar.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's just, I kind of am in that weird spot where it's like trying to be like, you should definitely go check it out. And I think that, the best part about it is no matter who I tell that to, there's something going on right now that I think is for everybody. Maybe not every show on the EXP is for you. That's possible. Right. Maybe it is, because there's a lot of people I know that I jump in and I see them in every single stream, no matter what stream I jump into. But I think that, whether it is, Nick's original art shows, whether it's our stuff, whether it's Dan Wickline stuff, there's a lot of great content.
We've got this great game show that I can't put over enough. It's called Triple T, Talk and Treats Trivia. Not the world's greatest name, but Triple T is kind of fun. It's hosted by Chuck Pino, who's a comic editor and an indie comic guy, and his wife Wendy, where they spend the first 15 minutes of their hour interviewing a creator, and then the second 45 minutes of their hour playing trivia based on that creator's work, but not like about the creator's work, but themed. So if they have a guy on who did vampire books, they ask vampire trivia.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, whoever wins gets a bundle of that indie creator's work.
That's awesome.
So there's a chance you go on, and just because you know about, obscure vampire trivia, now you're going to get a book from somebody who you've never heard of, or several books from somebody you've never heard of that you may really dig.
Yeah.
Like the big thing that I do every day is think about how can we make a show for somebody who's not currently watching a show?
Right.
How can we build a show for someone who is currently out there going, gee, I wish I saw this thing out there in the comic book YouTube world. So,
well, it's really fun for me to watch and, be I almost a fly on the wall, maybe slightly more than a fly on the wall, being able to kind of, make some suggestions here and there. Because
a horse fly on the wall?
A what?
A horse fly?
A horse fly on the wall.
Slightly bigger fly on the wall?
Yeah. Maybe a wasp on the wall or something. Can sting every once in a while. But, it's one of those things that's funny is I've gone out of my way in doing this channel the goal of this channel has never been and will never be to become as big as I could possibly be on YouTube. When I started this channel, I intentionally made that decision to not go for like maximum growth and try to become as big a YouTuber as possible. And it has to do with my motivations for doing this. And it also has to do with like, I knew what would keep, and I think this is important to talk about, honestly, things like ego or integrity in check.
Right.
And I will say, and I'm not the kind of person who would ever name names on this, because there's a lot of channels out there that I don't feel like had that intention. And that, by the way, is perfectly fine. There's a lot of channels that go onto YouTube from every niche and every genre that their goal is to make as much money as possible, and that's their job. And I'm not going to knock that. But I do think that a lot of complaints I hear about comic book YouTube creators out there in the zeitgeist come from things that, aren't growing in the correct fashion, in my opinion, the way I've chose to do things.
Right.
And that's because I'm doing a very specific type of channel. When it comes to a channel that had commerce and a selling experience built in from the ground floor as part of the makeup and the DNA of that channel, that's a much different story. And also, like, you know, seeing the ways in which I think you guys are able to be able to grow when you implement some changes is really exciting. But also just how, when I talk about that integrity piece, when I talk about that kind of, you know, ethical piece, when it comes to being a part of the selling environment on the experience, I think that's something that's going to be tremendous, because
Yeah.
without naming names of other platforms, there's all these platforms that people buy on that have this negative reputation and this negative connotation.
Right.
And
And it's we vet the people who come on our channel.
yeah,
I'm not going to let you come on the experience and sell if you're going to scam people. In fact, I have a show on the experience right now, and I'm not going to name names, that they are struggling with their shipping policy. They're not getting books out in a timely manner. Well, guess what? Your boy's getting on a plane and flying to the city where the shop is, and spending 3 or 4 days working with them, getting their shipping caught up, building a shipping system, and getting them trained on how to ship this stuff. Not because they weren't great when they started, but they've had some employee turnover, and it's just people don't know, and they need some help. And that's what the experience is we're at the core, we're all comic book people. We're all people who were in this business before live selling and before the internet became a thing like it is now. That's a weird way to say it, but, you know, this internet comic thing became a thing like it is now, and we're all going to be in it after. So we have to be good stewards of the fandom, which is a big fancy way of saying we can't be dicks. And when someone is, if you think I'm not on the phone with that person immediately after showing, what in the hell? Then you're wrong, because I am. And that's, you know, that's a big part of it, right? Like, we don't deal in speculation all that often. We do a little bit. You can't ignore it.
Right. It's a part of it.
Right. You have to, but we don't talk about things like that are negative to the overall industry. You know, we don't engage in hyperbole except on a show like Devil's Advocates, where the point is for me to be hyperbolous, you know?
Yeah. It's obviously baked into the concept of
right.
some of the things out there. Like, you know, Nick's doing a show on, here's, you know, the original art with the first appearance of Spider-Boy. Well, yeah, you're going to realize what you're going into watching that show, right?
Right. Like, but you're still buying original comic art.
Yeah. And you can't go wrong with
regardless of what it is. Right. That show has always been about, look, you know, we get that you're buying something that has an intrinsic gain in value, but don't buy it, one, if it's going to put you in a bad financial position.
Yeah.
And two, if you aren't going to love it and enjoy it. I have a piece hanging right here. It's a Doctor Who page with Peter Capaldi holding a guitar. My introduction to Peter Capaldi was, I was a fan of the band The Dream Boys. If you don't know the Dream Boys, it was a punk band from Scotland where Craig Ferguson from the Craig Ferguson Show and the Drew Carey Show was the drummer. Peter Capaldi was the guitar player.
Yeah.
I love that page. That page ain't worth crap. I paid way too much for that page, but I don't care. And that's the idea, right? Is it's about understanding that people love what they love, and let them love it and help them love it and help them be involved in it.
Yeah. So. Well, that's just it. Like, when it comes to, you know, there's people that I talk to, kind of doing the kind of content that I do, and, you know, the FOMO busting and stuff like that. While still, you know, talking about the news and all the characters coming out and everything like that, I it's a very delicate thing that I do. And I try to, you know, combat that with things like transparency and honesty, and like where this channel comes from, and how money is never, ever going to be the number one consideration for this channel. Like, again, I could make 10 times what I do now doing this channel if I wanted to, if I was willing to sacrifice, you know, the morals that I use to create this channel. And when I talk to these people that come to me and they're like, hey, I got ripped off, or You know, I've had bad luck, or this guy scammed me, or this seller was mean to me, or, you know, abused me in this way. Like, or they don't say it in those words a lot of times, because I think partially they don't want to admit it, but that's literally what's happening sometimes. And one of the first pieces of advice I tell them is, you know, think about why the channel you're following and buying from, or the seller, or the, you know, internet comics person, right? Think about why they're doing what they're doing. And if you consider that, you're usually going to see their integrity kind of shine through, right? And with EXP, it's like, it's very clear that it's a, you know, like every show mentions things like, you know, local comic shop locator, and all these different things, right, that are pro the greater industry. It's trying to lift up, you know, the LCS. It's trying to lift up smaller sellers out there too. And I think that's super important. And then you can see that, you know, they're backed up by people from within the industry itself. They have long-term plans in place. They take things with an ethical approach, and that's super important. It can't be understated enough. So I think it's great to see it.
The answer I give when people ask me what I do in comics is, I tell them I'm a cheerleader. I'm a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader for comics, right? Like,
Nice.
give me the booty shorts, let's go. I know, well, I no longer, well, the thing is, I no longer have a vested interest in selling, distributing, or any of that in comics. I just have an interest in making comics as awesome as it can be as a whole.
Yeah.
And having that freedom for me means that I can look at everything and say, you know what? This is the right way to do this. Is Jen King, I'll tell you guys, Jen King is a Sunday school teacher. She's a church lady. I've never heard Jen King swear once in my life, unless the swear was the title of a comic book, right? That's who she is. But because she has a fiduciary responsibility to her customers, to her store, she can't make wholly impartial decisions all the time. I can. And that's why the experience works so well is, you know, Nick stands on one side of the business. Jen stands on another. You know, we don't have any distributors involved, but they're over there. And I get to stand right in the middle and be like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Or that's right, that's right, that's right.
Yeah.
And, or, hey, you're all a little bit right. Here's the compromise.
Right.
And raise the tide for everybody. So,
yeah. Yeah, and I just think it's important to point that out. And you know, like I'm big on, you know, disclosures and you know, all that kind of stuff. It's something that's come up recently. Again, I won't get into specific details, but it's come up recently in our kind of sector we're in. So I like to, you know, kind of take this opportunity to kind of, you know, re-avow that stuff. Like, yes, I am a partner with the EXP for the show we do and everything like that. Don't want to hide that in any kind of way, shape, or form. But if you guys know me and my content, you should know that there's only one reason that I would consider doing something like that, and that is because I believe in what's happening and I want to be part of it. And that's exactly how I feel.
And the second that changes, like, and this is the important thing, is the second that any of that changes, Chris will say to me, hey, and that for me is always an audible signal of, oh shit, where am I astray? And I have a big board over here that says, where did I go off the path? And it just reminds me to stay on it all the time. So
yeah, that is cool. Well, I do appreciate this chance to get to know Kyle a little bit better.
We have two more questions you sent me.
I do have two more. I was going to actually ask those two questions real fast. My point is that I have some other topics we are going to get to a little bit later in the show. We're going to go over those topics relatively quickly, which is probably for the best, because short of talking about them in a very general sense, I don't have a ton to say about them, but I did want to talk about them.
Okay.
But we are going to wrap up the questions. The first one, let's make this one kind of a quickie, hopefully. If you could greenlight any comic book movie or TV series today, you had the power to snap your fingers and make it happen, kind of a reverse Thanos thing, what would it be?
Dead Boy Detectives.
Dead Boy Detectives. That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
And that is to say, I would redo Sandman season 1 properly with the
Ooh.
appropriate amount of Corinthian, and introduce Dead Boy Detectives, which I get don't come until volume 2, but then spin off for season 2 to have Corinthian stories and Dead Boy Detective stories, because now you've got
Okay.
serial killer and murder mystery.
I like it.
So
I like it.
I gave that one a lot of thought.
I honestly can't wait for Sandman season 2, by the way.
It's true. It's delayed, of course, like
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, I mean, of course. And that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, Daniel Warren Johnson doing Transformers later this year, which is really cool. That actually kind of, you're diving into the next piece we'll go into, their Comics and Tortillas, but I am not gonna stop you.
I already emailed him going, hey, when you're ready to talk, call me.
The flip side of that news, which again I'm bearing the lead here, is that Larry Hama is going to continue on with G.I. Joe as well over at IDW, which is awesome to hear. Larry Hama is a personal hero of mine. I am excited because unless something crazy happens in about a week and a half, I'll get a chance to meet him, and I am super pumped for that.
Enormously nice guy. Just don't ask him to use a webcam.
Don't ask him to use a webcam.
Yeah, we had him on the Experience. We did a Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month event, hosted by Amy Chu and Ming Chen from Comic Book Men, and one of our big guests was Larry Hama. And he took his laptop to like a family barbecue he was at and was going to do the interview and couldn't figure out how to get his webcam to work. And none of his grandkids or nieces or nephews or whoever the kids around would help him.
Oh no. I'm going to be like 100% honest. One of the things I'm going to ask Larry Hama when I meet him is if he'll come on my show. It's my dream.
He absolutely, he will. He's a genuinely nice person, but I don't know. Maybe it's just don't ask him to use his webcam at a family barbecue.
Okay. I wonder if I mentioned to him, like, hey, are you going any barbecues? Because if so, I think we need to reschedule it.
Well, and then they did that interview and it was supposed to be an hour and it went like an hour and a half and they talked about pho for most of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I actually would love to talk about some pho. Pho. I don't have a good pho place anywhere near me now, and it bothers me.
Me either.
So this is the final question. Another question that I love to ask people in our position, and I think you're gonna have a great answer. What is your biggest regret in comics? Now that could be, just to clarify, a collecting thing, an industry thing. In general, what is your biggest regret regarding comic books?
Outside of not being able to keep my store going, this wouldn't have been an answer until Tuesday night. It's that I never got to interview John Romita Sr.
Yep.
There are a number of great interviews that I've gotten to do since I started the Experience. When I was in traditional media, I've gotten to interview, if you're wrestling fans, in 1 month, I talked to Jerry the King Lawler, Tony Schiavone, and JR from wrestling announcers. Like in 1 month, I talked to all of them. I got to interview Neil Adams. I've gotten to talk to so many people, but I never got to talk to John Sr. or George Perez. And my greatest regrets is that I never got to, in a setting like this, in a one-on-one setting, really express to them how much their contributions to this industry have meant to me over the years. Now, that's not to say I've met them. I never met John Sr., but I've met George Perez a number of times at conventions and other things, but it's never been that, let me tell you what you mean to me moment. And so my greatest regret is that I never got to do that. And it has changed since Tuesday, the way I'm approaching some of the things we're doing on the Experience. I had a tremendous fear for a long time of asking these people, because it's George Perez. Does he really want to come on and do a half an hour interview? But if you don't ask, you never get the shot.
Yep.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And because I never took those shots, I never got those chances. So that's my greatest regret. And yeah, I'm still grieving John Romita Sr. in a big and incredibly awkward way.
Yeah.
So I will just ramble until you change the subject, but it's that.
Well, and it's on my list, and it's something that I meant to bring up at the top of the show, but I just got to talking to you, and it led right into the interview. But was going to take a moment tonight to talk about John Romita Sr. and you've given us the tragically perfect time to talk about it. And look, everybody who is even marginally associated with comic books and knows the names of a few creators knows he's a legend. He was a veteran, just an amazing force in comic books, just synonymous with Spider-Man and so many other characters. I would argue in so many ways created the look of Spider-Man that made Spider-Man what he is. For most people, for a generation or two or three. But yeah, it's one of those things where what you mentioned about George Perez and your regret with him, and with John Romita Sr. That's one of the things that it's kind of a theme that's kind of coming up in the show is I'm going to go meet Larry Hama, who is not a spring chicken. I'm hoping he lives for a very long time and has a very long successful career still ahead of him, of course. But when I talk to some of these creators, it's what you were talking about. This is echoed for me because my biggest regret, it's so uncanny that you said that, is there were so many chances I had to go meet Stan Lee, and it was never the right time for me. He did so many appearances and so many signings. I'd always have another chance, or I'd always get to do that. And then one day I didn't have that opportunity anymore. And I could pretty realistically say that Stan Lee is not the end all be all. Like, he's not my favorite writer. He's not my favorite creator. However, in the same breath, Stan Lee is absolutely the first face you'd have to put on the Mount Rushmore of comic books, right? And in a way, touched so many lives. And the name John Romita Sr. is not that far removed from that precipice of that mountain, right? And just the enormous loss to the community. It's one of those things where grieving for the family, all the fans that have been touched by his work, are definitely experiencing this right now, and just couldn't help but scroll through some of his beautiful work and stuff for hours after hearing the news. So it's one of those things where I'm probably not going to say a whole lot more about it because I think his body work speaks for itself more than anything I can really say or add to it. But the part I will walk away from that from is I try to take positive lessons from negative things or from tragedies or from anything in life that I have a bad time with. And for me, it's what I experienced when I felt that serious sense of loss when I wasn't able to meet Stan Lee, which was my first kind of exposure to that feeling. Don't be afraid to go meet your heroes if that's something that matters to you. It doesn't matter to everybody. Not everybody needs to go meet the creators and go to conventions and do all those things. Some people just want a signed book, or some people just want to collect their works, whatever it is. But if that is something that matters to you, don't put it off. Life is short.
Right.
Try to prioritize it if you can. By the way, have a good night, Comics Tortillas. Hopefully you're off to go make some excellent quesadillas or something. Enjoy.
God, I wonder if Taco Bell's still gonna be open when we're done with this. It's like 1:30 here.
Well, I can tell you, just as K-pop's comment alludes to here, I definitely.
I've got a number of LCS's K-pop. I just no good pho.
Well, she's talking about me because I don't have either. I live in the middle of nowhere, though. It's my own fault. but yeah, like I have that sense of trepidation of like, oh, I'm gonna bother this person, like because I do want to do these interviews with creators. It's one of my favorite things that I get to do is get a chance to interview people, like Kyle tonight, or I have dipped my toes in that arena. I've interviewed Randy Emberlin, Trish Forstner, and I'd love to add a whole lot of other creators to that list. And hopefully I can do that. But it's what kind of empowers me to say, like, don't be afraid to ask. Asking both of those people, I was 100% sure in the moment they'd be like, no, thank you. And I'll be honest and say there's actually a couple other people I talked to different conventions that were willing to come on that I had this weird secondary feeling of like, well, they said yes at the con, but I haven't followed up with them because, like, what if they say no, right? Hey, Kenneth, welcome to the show, man. Glad to see you on here.
Yeah. So I'll tell my Neil Adams story, and then we can, because it's funny.
Okay.
And we can transition into other things to bring the mood back up. First time I met Neil Adams, I was scared to talk to him because it's, pardon my French, it's goddamn Neil Adams.
Yeah.
But I went up to him at the first thing Friday at a C2E2. And I walk up to him and I have his Avengers, Uncanny Avengers skull cover that he did. And I have the race comic. And I buy the poster size of Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm having him sign these things, and we just kind of start talking, and there's another guy standing there. And never once did we talk about superheroes. Never once did we talk about comics. We talked about Cosmos, the television show, because this is when Neil deGrasse Tyson was making his version.
Oh, not the Carl Sagan version.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like,
okay.
And Neil the whole time was, Carl Sagan was so much better. Carl Sagan was so much better. And, I'm talking to him and I go, I don't disagree that Carl Sagan was better, but Neil has a way of communicating it for today's people. And he looks at me and goes, yeah, that guy'd make good comics. And then he just goes back to signing his stuff, and we never talked about comics again. So
that's great.
A few years later, I'm interviewing him for something. And I mentioned that we had met a few years previous at C2E2 and talked about Cosmos, and he remembered that conversation. He goes, yeah, awesome. I need to talk to that guy about making a comic. And then we're launching the experience. And before the experience ever launched, Nick and I did some interviews kind of soft on the ground with one of the Hildebrandt brother that's still alive. And I can never remember if it's Greg or Tim or
Tim, but I'm not sure.
I think it's Tim. And Neil. And, I know that Neil is historically kind of curmudgeonly sometimes. But he comes on and Nick says it'll be about an hour. Neil goes, great, no problem. 3 hours later, he stopped talking. And Nick goes, can you give a plug for our new channel? And he goes, sure. What do you want me to say? And Nick has me tell him what to say. And he says it. And he says it not quite right. And I go, close enough. And he goes, well, what did I get wrong? And I kind of corrected him a little. And he goes, all right. And he said it again. He said it right. But before, he didn't leave me any place to cut it out. He goes, did I say it right that time? And I go, yes, thank you so much, sir. Did you ever talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson? He goes, son of a bitch.
That is awesome, man.
Yeah, it was one of the greatest moments of my life. Like, but that's the benefit to just breaking down and asking these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I'm reminded of and this is the days before cell phones, kids. I'm reminded of calling around like a girl's house or whatever and asking her to a dance, which right now this just makes my stomach feel like terrible. It's kind of that same feeling, right? Like at the end of the day, like looking back though, even though my stomach was rolling, the worst they could have said was no, or well, the worst they could have done was make fun of you at school the next day. But anyways, yeah, it's one of those things where it's just something you kind of have to do
Yep.
if that's interesting to you.
And
Otherwise, you'll never have it happen.
I said this the other night on the Dan Wickline show when we were talking about this. I go, someone please wrap Walt Simonson in bubble wrap until I get a chance to send him an email on Monday. Like, to see when I can have Walt on.
Yeah.
And Louise, like, please just someone wrap them in bubble wrap.
That Walt and Wheezy are on my. I have a list of people that I would love to talk to, and they are on that list.
We've had Louise on. She was on with Christy Blanche early on in the experience, but I would like to sit down with them and do like a retrospective.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. Speaking of retro, I mentioned we are going to go through some kind of quick news here. Let's talk about the couple. It doesn't get much more retro for kids that grew up in the 80s, 90s, or even later on than Transformers and G.I. Joe. They so there are some very mild spoilers just talking about this. This is from Skybound, by the way. I pulled them up because they are the source here. But Transformers and G.I. Joe are coming back, and I don't think this is much of a spoiler. If you feel like it is, I'm sorry. I can tell you that this is like the whole Death of Miss Marvel thing. It's been leaked well ahead of the comic book coming out by the source themselves, so I don't think it's a problem. But I apologize if I ruined anybody's day.
I will say this though: it was a much better kept secret than the Miss Marvel thing.
It was. There were rumblings a few weeks ago,
right?
That, if you're really close to the ground, you probably knew, but
right. And Robert Kirkman was like, "Oh, we're working with these things." No, he didn't tell anybody it was going to be Avoid Rivals until the last possible second.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and it's very cool to see two franchises that I feel like have had. I'm not a big Transformers guy. I love Transformers. I watched the cartoon for sure when I was a kid. I can't profess to be up on Transformers lore or anything like that anywhere near as much as G.I. Joe. If you don't know me this by now, I am a huge G.I. Joe fan. I still am in touch with G.I. Joe, the Classified series, and not necessarily the most recent comic books, although I have bought some recently, but I definitely love what's going on with those franchises historically, not so much recently. And to see them come back from, a trusted steward, to see them come back with Skybound, who I think has a really good reputation with world building and kind of stewardship of IP. I'm really excited for this. So you're basically having Transformers and G.I. Joe come back, be saved from IDW, however you want to look at it, and being moved over to Skybound. And this is all culminating in Void Rivals, which came out yesterday. Void Rivals #1, which I haven't read. Kyle hasn't read it either, right? So we don't really know the story here yet. I'm sure a lot of people out there have read it already and could probably school us on this. But this is so cool. I can, we have Larry Hama, like I mentioned earlier, is coming back to do G.I. Joe 301 to start over the run or whatever you want to call it. They're also launching a Duke series, which is really cool. Keep in mind on the G.I. Joe side, I can tell you that a lot of this coincides with there are a lot of plans for G.I. Joe, some of which I will not talk about tonight, and some I will. One of those things is, we have several different properties, like a movie relaunch they've talked about. And there's been some TV shows in the works. Duke is a rumored series that might come out, for example. There's also a Lady J series that's kind of been in development hiatus for a while. And then Transformers. I mean, Transformers are a beloved franchise. Oh, I forgot, the Cobra Commander 1 also coming out January 2024, which is awesome. But yeah, so I haven't read it yet. I don't have a ton to say about this. I'm excited. I think it was time for a change in, let's say, editorial presence on these properties. And I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, both of these properties have really gotten the fuzzy end of the lollipop while they've been at IDW.
Yeah.
And it's good to see them go to Skybound. But here's what's interesting to me about this. And I think it's something that's slightly buried in the lead because of the way they're approaching it with bringing in, these writers and creators to do this. They're going to get the creator owned treatment. They're going to get that thing that is what made Invincible and The Walking Dead the success level they are. Right? Kirkman is going to essentially be able to shepherd them the way he shepherded these other things. And because they're getting that treatment, all of the sudden we can't piss off Hasbro of it all matters a little bit less.
Yeah.
Now it's not to say Hasbro's not going to be involved, because Hasbro still owns the properties.
Right.
But nothing is going to come out of Image Comics that doesn't get that creator-owned treatment.
Yeah.
So that's going to be huge. And I think, and this is, I mean, we want to pull back even a little further, zoom out even a little further. The truth of the matter is if this is successful, people who have had success on that level of Robert Kirkman can start to talk about, well, what IP would I want to be creator owned? And so now all of a sudden you have someone like, I was trying to come up with some names when I was thinking about this earlier. And the name I came back to was Neil Gaiman. Yeah. Well, what IP is out there that is currently like licensed to someone that he has had enough success that he could buy, or that he could essentially creator own out of, take it and creator own it? So the name, when I'm thinking about Neil Gaiman, the IP that came to mind was Conan the Barbarian, which is at Titan Comics now. Well, if that doesn't really work out, and the people who own the Conan the Barbarian license, which is I think it's still the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate,
yeah,
could sell to Neil Gaiman the publishing rights, and he could go to Image and be like, hey, and all of a sudden now he's creator owning Conan.
Yeah,
and it's you think about some of these other Flash Gordon, some of these other old IPs that are just kind of languishing, that if these are successful, I think you'll start to see your top echelon people who have Walking Dead and Invincible kind of success. So, people who have Good Omens, American Gods, and Sandman success going, you know what? And a company like Marvel, who is, I think, on sometimes struggling to treat its IP evenly and equally, could very easily get a big check from someone to license Iron Man. That's the name I'm going to come up with in the moment because I'm exhausted. But, or, Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And, all right, go and self-publish, or go and find a way to have it published elsewhere, distributed by someone else. And I think it could really change the game for the way we look at licensed properties.
Yeah, which is, it's a weird thing to think about because there's so much possibility, but when it comes to like licensed properties that, like you mentioned, have been languishing, and it also comes to, I almost, like, in my head, the term I use for those is like magnet creators. Like there's somebody who's when they're involved in a thing, people will gravitate towards that thing. Neil Gaiman is a great example. Like a name that comes to my mind, like Stephen King is somebody like that, right? Like you attach that kind of name,
right,
to a
Stephen
project.
King or Joe Hill or somebody.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think that's a really good point. But it's also kind of speaks to this thing that when we talk about some of the things that are wrong with comics today, and I'm using air quotes because that's a very subjective thing, but we talk about those kinds of things. These are the types of things that might be a step in the right direction for kind of repairing that bridge with readers and bringing in new readers, which I think is of paramount importance. So,
Yep.
Keeping in the theme of G.I. Joe, real quick, I don't have a lot to say about this, but I think it's cool as hell, and I'm going to show it off for a second. Hasbro had launched a new HasLab project. They're big, almost like I would say crowd-funded, in the sense that, you know, they're essentially asking for money up front before they make production on something, and it has to hit a certain goal. They announced a classified line, which is their 6-inch line of figures version of the Dragonfly assault helicopter. It's just amazingly huge. It's like 3 feet long. These are renders for it. It's got like a lighted cockpit, you know, interchangeable missiles and blast effects, and it's going to come with extra figures. Comes with a flight stand. Make sure I'm showing that here. It's fully funded right now. This is something that I'm going to a con here in a few weeks. You got some time left on this. A whole 31 days left, but I'm probably going to be backing this because I'm just such a G.I. Joe fan. And I can't imagine having a 3-foot freaking assault helicopter behind me when I am at my little workstation here, to go next to my HasLab Sentinel that's back there too. So I've backed one of their projects before.
Can I tell you my problem with HasLab?
Yes, please.
Why everything got to be so big? Like, they made Jabba's pleasure barge, and it's the size of a coffee table.
Right.
Like, I want it so bad, but where do I put it? Like, my house is not that big. Like, well, you know, if I got every one of these things I wanted, people would call me, I'd be on that show Hoarders. Be like, no, it's like not that much. It's just the HasLab stuff.
And that's my problem too, because so they did a classified scale vehicle before they did the Hiss tank. And man, I wanted to back that thing. My finances were not in order at that point in time, so I couldn't do it. And now I'm kind of glad I didn't, because there's no way that I'd want both of these things, you know, kind of hanging around. Like, I've already got some big stuff. I've got a giant Lego Star Destroyer and a giant Lego State Slave 1 up here. And, you know, I don't understand how people, that's what she said. I don't understand how many people can afford to buy like all these, like, you know, artifacts and Iron Studios statues, and it's just crazy. It starts to get so big.
I made that mistake one time. Sideshow did a 1-to-1 scale Yoda, and I bought it, and now I can never move because it weighs too much.
Yeah, man, it's pretty crazy. Like, it's such a mixed bag, because on one hand, it's so cool they're making it, and you know, for a lot of fans like me, like, this is a really awesome thing. But on the other hand, it is huge. It takes up a lot of room. It's a pretty big investment of time and money.
I just can't wait for them to announce that they're doing the aircraft carrier from Transformers.
Oh God, or the aircraft carrier from G.I. Joe.
It's true, either one of them, really. And they'll be like, so just so you know, it's 37 feet long. It actually floats. You're going to have to rent dock space. Like, and people will back it in a heartbeat, and they'll be like, okay, I can't put, this doesn't fit in my driveway.
Yeah.
Right? We told you got to put it in the water. Like, you own an aircraft carrier now. Like,
it's so great. I did want to mention real fast to you about this, since I'm talking about it. It would be criminal not to mention that the first unlocked tier was unlocked, and that is Ripcord and a Night Force variant from the subline. Then the second one just got announced, and we haven't hit the backer reward for it yet. But I think this is cool. Although I've seen a lot of people pissed off about it, which I guess I can only understand because it's the internet and people are strange. But this is the Glinda figure, which was an Argentinian repaint of Scarlet, who became like her own character in the lore. I think it's really cool. This is a kind of like an obscure thing, but it's also kind of a nod to foreign figure collectors. And that's a whole thing within the GI Joe collecting community. So I think it's pretty cool actually. But they announced that one. I guess we got to get to 16,000 backers, and we're currently at 13,000. So that seems pretty good with a month to go on this. And then there's another figure that has yet to be revealed. But there's the prototype. You can kind of see they showed off on their live stream of like, that's actually a very tall guy. I think that guy's over 6 foot. I think he's like 6'3", I want to say. So
You think that guy dyes his beard to get the ring around his mouth?
I don't know, man. I'm kind of like, it's weird for me to talk about that because I got to the age where I've got enough white hairs in my beard that,
Sure, but like
it's
he's got like
starting to
a
look
perfect,
weird.
it's just dark here. So
Yeah.
is this what's dyed, or is this what's
I don't
dyed?
know.
Anyway,
It's a good question. No, but I wonder about that with guys with like the salt
put the
and pepper
beard
hair.
emoji in the chat if you can.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, it's
I'm starting to get punchy.
it's very late for you, and it's getting
It's
later
almost
for me.
2 here, yeah.
But yeah, it's just a cool thing. I'm excited for it. I'm gonna try to pick one up just because I feel like I have to. I will say that to the point of, do they make smaller ones? They did make a 3 3/4 scale Sky Striker, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I'm with you. Like they it's not a HasLab, but they're doing Magneto's helmet now. They're doing some other stuff that's more realistic in scale, I think. They
And
did
like the
Pete Doc's
Magneto's
backpack.
helmet one I backed. There's been a few like when they've done that, and actually in this office behind me here, which is my audio recording studio, I have shelves that are all 3D printed heads or helmets with headphones on them.
Nice.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's a nice little aesthetic, and it really does a lot of sound dampening, which is cool.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm used to seeing like styrofoam heads or mannequin heads or whatever for that, but that's way cooler in my opinion. But yeah, it's just kind of a neat thing. The final bit of news, and you know what, like I'm barely going to touch on this probably, but I will mention it because it's on my agenda and I'm a completionist. Is I hate the way that StreamYard kind of makes me hit 3 different things if you're sharing a tab before you can actually.
Oh, bro, we gotta talk about this. You don't have to do this anymore.
Oh, okay.
Here, check. It won't work. It's not gonna look great with this, but like,
interesting.
Yeah, there's some stuff you can do so that it doesn't have to look quite like that anymore.
Okay, I even meant more just like the fact that like if you're sharing a tab, you have to like stop sharing your old tab, load up the new tab, and then it pulls you over to that tab, and then you have to share it to screen.
We'll talk about it because there's some stuff coming from my StreamYard call yesterday.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if you were talking about that publicly or not, but I was trying to avoid
it. In case you wonder, we use a piece of software called the StreamYards. I do work on the dev team for StreamYard.
So, he's a cool guy to talk to about some things and get some tips and tricks because I definitely can use them. So the headline here is that Disney has delayed a whole bunch of movies. This is not terribly surprising with things like a writer's strike, although probably a lot of these projects I think were
destined to be delayed anyway.
Yeah, both written and destined to be delayed. I think those things are both true. But the biggest thing is a lot of people talking about the Avatar delay. The 5th movie from Avatar right now is supposed to be released in 2031, which is great because I saw Zoe Saldana mention that she's going to be like 55 when the last Avatar movie comes out, and she was like 27 or something when she filmed the first one.
And they will have spent enough money making those movies to cure cancer, world hunger, and male pattern baldness.
But also, really cool blue aliens and like, a lot of tropes and unobtainium thrown in there. So like, it's worth it, right?
If I needed to see blue things stick their tails together to doink, I would have just watched Watchmen.
See, I thought you were going to say Smurfs.
Well, Smurfs also, there's a number of things.
Yeah.
By the way, if we find out that Avatar, at the end of Avatar, they wake up and it's just freaking a Papa Smurf's dream. Like it's what is that? What was that show?
Oh, the Saint
Saint
Elmo's
Elsewhere.
Fire.
Saint
Or
Elmo's
yeah,
Saint
that's what it
Elsewhere.
is. Yeah.
Like if this whole thing is Saint Elsewhere in Papa Smurf's head, I'm gonna lose my mind.
That would actually low key be freaking awesome. By the way, shout out to Nick Barucci. Well, I'm surprised is awake and popping
Smarks.
in here and saying hello. And yeah, we're this was the, you know, if you missed the show earlier, Nick, we did the interview with Kyle so my viewers could get a chance to know him a little bit better. And also so I could get a chance to know him a little bit better and talk about some of the news from around the comic book world.
Hey Nick, I'm taking tomorrow off. It's entirely too late. I'm gonna sleep until Saturday.
Sorry, Nick, I'm a terrible influence. I kept up Kyle way too late.
Oh, Nick knows. Nick knows that I'll be up and sending emails at 10 a.m. It won't
matter. But yeah, the short and skinny of this is, and I think this is zero surprising. I saw this and I was just like, of course they're delayed. Like it just makes sense. You kind of expected it.
So the people in the know are expecting the writers' strike to end in September at this point,
right?
Because the AMPTP has not come back to the table yet with the WGA, and now the AMPTP had made a deal with the Directors Guild of America, of which I'm a non-voting member, but that's not going to ratify.
Okay.
Not enough people are going to vote yes to ratify that deal. So they're going to have to renegotiate with the Directors Guild. And the SAG-AFTRA contract is up at the end of next month. So they're potentially facing 3 strikes on all fronts, all about the same idea of residuals and pay from streamers, as well as a limitation on the use of AI in this content going forward. And there are several other things that these unions are rightfully fighting for that aren't asking a lot. By the way, 2 weeks was how long the strike had to last to cost the studios more than the WGA was asking for in residuals. 2 weeks. And it's been over a month.
Yeah.
It's like 7 weeks now.
And it's like you said, it's probably going to go on for a while, and then there's going to be more strikes. And
I will throw this out there to anybody, and I'm not. Again, I'm a non-voting DGA member, but there is a website out there, WGA Garage Sale, where members of the WGA are putting up, especially the more successful members of the WGA are putting up some of their memorabilia to fund helping the WGA members who are really struggling without work. And the other people who are affected by this. One of them I saw was the guy who created Veronica Mars. I'm going to blank on his name right now. But he had the Neptune High Letterman jacket. That was the cast gift for season 2 that he put up, and it was already at like $12,000.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
That's a good cause. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with this. I mean, you could talk about this all day, but there's a lot of stuff going on with this that I think is important. You know, the use of AI is something that, you know, comic book people are no stranger to talking about, with it being a very hot button topic with artists. But I mean, obviously the same thing applies to storytelling as well. In addition to all this, you kind of have this layer of talking about rights and creators getting rewards. A side note to this is that there was a recent settlement too on the Marvel comic book creators getting some residuals and some kickbacks for films. They sued Marvel a while back, and they actually settled that case, which is kind of a good thing, I think, because there was a previous case, at least one prominent previous case where the creators lost. So this is kind of a step in the right direction. I think we're starting to see, you know, cuts by inches, death by inches of extra kind of control and positive things happening for creatives, which it's so important because you have to inspire creatives to gain from their works to get more cool works from them. That's just how it works. But yeah, a lot of live action stuff affected. Moana, Deadpool 3, Star Wars, Avatar 3, 4, and 5, which is a weird sentence to say. Captain America: Brave New World. I mean, you guys can check out check out this Variety article yourself to see all the different stuff that's shuffling around. Thunderbolts, Blade, Fantastic Four, Blade being delayed. I mean, that should be a freaking drinking game at this point. Avengers Kang Dynasty being delayed. Big surprise there, especially with everything going on with Jonathan Majors and all kinds of stuff. It's not really surprising on a lot of these. New Alien movie coming out. I actually didn't notice that earlier when I skimmed this article. So that is interesting too. But yeah, just a lot of stuff going on, a lot of delays to be expected, but hey, just kind of be aware it's going on. Shout out to the immortal Biggie Shack. I was in the stream earlier. He had a good stream going on. What's up, brother? Thanks for coming in. Those darned kids. Your kids are keeping you awake, man. It is time to break out the trank gun. Kind of chase them down Jurassic Park style. At least that's what I would do, but I'm a terrible parent. So yeah,
my dad would have by this point given me a little Jack or a little, something, and I'd be so drunk I'd be asleep at, I don't know how old your kids are, but it was like 3 or 4 for me.
Hey Nick, thanks for popping in. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful night, and talk to you soon, man. Have a good night. So yeah, the final thing I have to do real fast is do a channel member drawing, which we're going to do real fast, and then we'll kind of close down the show and talk about plugs and that kind of stuff at the end.
And just remember, if you win the drawing, I and the experience are paying your shipping.
Which is awesome, because that is one of the most frustrating things about running giveaways on a channel is, especially like giving away slabs or something, it starts to add up, right? So I do appreciate that quite a bit. Add this to the screen here. So I have here a list of all the channel members. This is on random.org, so I can kind of show you guys everything about how I do this. I'm going to actually, before I do that, real fast, because some people will tune in. Whoever wins will probably tune in right now and want to know what they won. If you are a $10 a month member, I'm going to do this again. You can win this Batman Neo Year 1 9.8 CBCS slab. So that is your special prize. You have to be a $10 a month member to be eligible for that prize. However, any of my channel members are eligible to win this prize, which is, we got the Amazing Spider-Man 26, the spoiler variant there. Got a Batman Spawn #1. Well, the new one shot. Darkhawk 1. For Pride Month, giving away this awesome, gorgeous Harley Poison Ivy. This was DC Pride 2022 special. Giving away that one. Giving away Dune House Atreides #1. Another cool book. And then to kind of, honor Spider-Verse coming out, Spider-Verse 2 coming out, got Edge of Spider-Verse. This is the first Night Spider, cool variant there you guys can take home. And then last but not least, the newer Edge of Spider-Verse series. I love that character, Spider-Rex, and the symbiote T-Rex and everything on it fighting. So hopefully some cool prizes. Let's bring that back up here.
Can I tell you my Dune House Atreides story?
You have a Dune House Atreides story?
Yeah, I've never read a Dune book until that one.
Oh, okay.
And I see the cover of #1, and I go live on the air with Dan and Jay, and I go, hey, I read this book. I thought Dune was like Tremors, and they both almost quit on me.
I mean, you're not wrong. There's just way less Kevin Bacon. And
I watched Tremors 2 last night because I couldn't sleep, and there's no Kevin Bacon.
Right.
It's really not enough Kevin Bacon.
What is the guy? I want to say Fred Willard, but that's not right.
No, I can never remember that guy.
I can't, but he the second guy of the duo, he's the only one in that one, right? The only and Bert comes back, right?
Fred Ward. And Michael Gross, yes. Earl and Bert.
Yep. That actually was kind of an entertaining sequel, believe it or not, in my opinion. For schlocky.
There's like 19 of them now.
Yes, there's even like a TV series. Yep, that they eventually do get to ass blasters. I wish that wasn't a thing, but it is. So real fast, I just want to thank, speaking of ass blasters, I just want to thank all of my channel members. The ones with the asterisk after it are the $10 a month members. X11 Bravo, fantastic community member who works with veterans to help support veterans in the community and is a veteran himself. His whole group is full of veterans. Actually, I should say it's him and a few other people. Comic Journey, another great YouTuber, is generous enough to be a $10 a month member. I appreciate that. Tex, who goes by many different handles that involve the word Tex in it. So I just call him Tex because it keeps it easy. He always changes his name. Great supporter. Also hangs out over in the Discord, which is a fun reminder to go join the Discord if you guys haven't already. There's a lot of cool conversations that happen over there. Huge shout out to Gamma Base Comics. Scott over at Gamma Base Comics is a big supporter of the channel. He's sending in some stuff later on. He's dealing with a bunch of unfortunate stuff with some family medical emergencies. He's actually going to be a little bit more involved in the show at a few different points. So huge shout out to them and their support. I really appreciate it. Go check the Gamma Base Comics group out on Facebook. It's a wonderful selling group on there. They do a lot of cool stuff. Starset Comics, great seller on Whatnot and a close friend of the channel. Sent some amazing AOKs in. Buddy McKinley, another good friend of the channel. Met up with him at a couple cons. He's always a good guy to hang out with. DC Irish, the longest subscriber to the channel, I believe, if channel member in standing, along with Preston. Always great. Chester Benson, Collector P, Jack B Comics, Tomb, Cody Fraley, Shiguki, Kikita, Matt268, Malverde Designs, Shadow Rat, Sonia, Darren, Psycho Phil, who was in here earlier. Hey, Psycho Phil, and Comic Bookworm, Naman, the Comic Bookworm, another great YouTube channel. All a bunch of wonderful people. Okay, so that's just saying thanks to everybody who joined and as a channel member. Yeah, you're not wrong, K-pop. But yeah, we're gonna roll this 3 times. That's the way I roll. The third time we roll it, that is the winner. So you see your name come up at the end. Wait until it says that we've randomized the list 3 times, and then you'll find out if you're the winner. So here's the first time. We're gonna let that one roll. And there is the first entry. We'll run it one more time before we get the winner. Preston showing up at the top. That wouldn't surprise me. Preston has really good luck when it comes to these things. Okay, so we've randomized the list 2 times. This is for all the marbles. The winner of the channel member reward package this month is Jack B Comics, second time winner. He's won once before, I want to say about 5 or 6 months ago. Jack B Comics, congratulations on your win. That is awesome. And seriously, a big shout out and special support for all my channel members. You guys pay for so many things that I use on this channel, like my Go Collect and Cover Price and all those different kinds of subscriptions I use for my price look back videos. My StreamYard access has been paid by channel memberships for a while now, so I appreciate all of that. Thanks so much, everyone, and congratulations to Jack B. So okay, so that pretty much wraps up the itinerary on the show. Kyle, I know you'd love to move on with your early morning / late evening.
What time does McDonald's start serving breakfast sandwiches?
Man, I feel like that answer has changed so many times over the years. Yeah. Like they were serving like all day breakfast on like 4 different items for a while. And then I feel like COVID. They rolled that back. Yeah. I think you can get hash browns all day long though, which makes sense because like fire them up, right?
I just want a sausage McMuffin.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hope Taco Bell's still open or something for you. Before you jump off, do you have anything you want to plug for this week or anything coming up?
Let's see. The Experience. Head over to The Experience. Just search the EXP pretty much everywhere else. The_EXP. We've got a lot of great shows all over the place. Monday, starting at 5 o'clock, we have Ryan Cummins, who has a book on Kickstarter right now, and Eric Palicki who has Blacksmith at Ahoy Comics. They'll be with Jen King. We'll have comic collectibles from Native Forces. And then new time, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific for all of you crazy West Coasters.
West Coast.
Well, you had less tornadoes today than I had. Anyway, Bronze Age Nerd and I will be talking about the war on adult comics. How many boobs are too many boobs? And how many euphemisms for male genitalia can you come up with in 32 pages? So we'll be talking about that on our show. And then there will be other shows all week. I don't know if we're ready to announce. We're doing something. We're hoping to do something on the art show on Friday. We're taking tomorrow off from the art show, but a week from tomorrow, kind of a commemoration of John Romita Sr. I'm not sure we're fully ready to announce what that's going to be yet.
Wow.
But I think it's going to be pretty good.
That is a chance to be absolutely incredible.
Right.
And I have a feeling will be.
Head over to our website, theexplive.com. That's two E's there, THEEXPLIVE.com. And you can join our mailing list and all that kind of stuff. We've got a form over there for the Devil's Advocate show. And you can tell Chris and I what you want us to talk about. All kinds of good stuff over there. And the explive.com.
Nice. Yeah, go check it out, guys. I'll be back with more content. I will tease one thing that I'm going to do here on the channel coming up. I mentioned I had a channel viewer reach out to me and talk about cover price and CLZ and collection management software. It's kind of funny that question came up today because I will be doing some content here very soon. I was going to try to film some of it tonight. We'll see how it goes. About doing the process to export my CLZ collection, my catalog of all my comic books, and import that into Overstreet Access, which is software that I've been playing around with for a while. You guys have seen it on the price lookbacks. I've been in contact with Overstreet Access. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. Unfortunately, most of it I can't talk about, but I will be able to soon. One of the first big things I've been waiting to do is get that import of data into Overstreet Access and start playing around with their software and collection management without having to like manually re-enter my entire collection. And I'm going to show that process and kind of show how it works, bugs and all, warts and all. It is still in beta, so that should be pretty fun. So that's something I have coming up this week. And the other thing that I was going to mention is big news for my channel. I am going to move the top 5 not to buy. I've been doing it on Wednesdays for New Comic Book Day. The problem with that is I'm covering the lists that came out on like Friday and Thursday the week before. So it's kind of a long time after those lists come out. I'm going to try to start dropping those videos on Sunday, which means Key Collector Turning 20 comes out on Thursday. CBSI Hot 10 comes out on Friday. So I can kind of compile my list on Friday night, Saturday, film the video, and have it up for you guys on Sunday. That's my new goal. I'm going to start doing that this week and see how it works out. See if you guys enjoy that or appreciate getting that information out a little bit sooner. And that's kind of what's been going on for my channel. So yeah, go hit up the XP. Next time you can catch me in the live stream will be on Monday night at 7 p.m. 10 Eastern over there with Kyle. So Kyle, it was a pleasure getting to meet you in a little more formal sense, getting a chance to know you a little bit and having to answer some questions. For all those watching on the rewind, if you have any further questions for Kyle, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. Luckily, I talk to him pretty regularly. We can still get those questions answered for you.
Or show up on Monday night and just derail the whole thing.
Hell yeah. Or call in and ask
Yeah,
yourself.
that's true. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
Advocates, for those of you who don't know, is an open phone line call-in show.
Yeah.
When we remember to open the phone line, which I promise to be better about. I promise.
For sure. And that's cool too, because I mean, I hopefully people don't abuse this too much, but there's people that occasionally want to talk to me about things or whatever. And if you want to call in and get mine and Kyle's take on it, do it, man. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
On that note, we are going to end it so everybody can move on with their evenings. Hopefully everybody has a fantastic Friday leading into an excellent weekend. My advice is to maybe consider going back and reading some excellent John Romita Sr. books this weekend in honor of Mr. Romita. So that would be my advice. Hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll catch you in the next episode of a Bronze Age Nerd Show or on Devil's Advocates. Have a fantastic evening. Later.